Uh, all right. Okay. All right. We have yes. We have our third panelist as well who joined us, Dr. Ravi Vanketkar sir. So we have all our panelists here. Thank you so much again to each one of you for taking out the time to be here with us. And as we know that COVID-19 pandemic, it has utterly disrupted our entire education system, and it has taken quite a turning point of everything turning online. And as especially as medical students, the unpredictability surrounding medical education has created a lot of distress, and that's one of the major reasons why we wanted to conduct this panel discussion. Again, this panel discussion has been organized by the Medical Students Association of India in collaboration with the Indian Medical Association Medical Students Network, IMA MSN. And the aim of the webinar would be to solve as many doubts we can of all the medical students, of all the common doubts which have been sprouting up in your minds since the COVID-19 pandemic began. And having said that, I would love to begin our webinar by introducing our lovely panelists to all of you. To start off, we have Dr. Ravi Kant sir with us on the panel, who is the director at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Rishikesh. He has also been the ex-vice chancellor at King George Medical University, Lucknow. He's also a Padma Shri and a BC Roy awardee and has been a member of the Medical Council of India from 2004 to 2007. It is an honor for us to have you in our webinar, sir, and thank you so much again for taking out the time to be with us. Um, we also have in our panel Dr. Anshu ma'am, who is a professor at the pathology department at Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Medical Sciences, Sevagram. She has also been awarded the CMCL FAIMER fellowship from Ludhiana and a FAIMER Institute fellowship from Philadelphia. In 2012, she was also awarded the International Fellowship in Medical Education from FAIMER USA, and the award allowed her to pursue her master's in health professions education from Mass University, which she completed with distinction in 2014. Thank you so much, ma'am, to be with us on the webinar. And thank you so much again for taking out the time to be with us on the webinar. On our panel, also we have Dr. Ravi Vanketkar sir. He's the current treasurer at the World Medical Association and a renowned anorectal surgeon. He's also been the past president at the Indian Medical Association in 2018. Thank you so much again, sir, to be a part of this webinar and taking out the time to be with us. We are hoping that all our students will learn a lot from all of you, as all of you are experts in your respective fields, and we are hoping to gain a lot from the entire webinar. Having said that, I would also like to introduce myself. My name is Molly Mehta, and I'm the current Vice President for External Affairs at the Medical Students Association of India. I would also like to introduce my co-moderator, Garima Garg, who is the State Secretary at the Indian Medical Association Medical Students Network, Maharashtra. Thank you so much to IMA MSN to be a part of this webinar along with MSAI. And without any further ado and without any further delay, um, we would love to start off with the webinar. Just a note to all the panelists that like you could switch on your videos and unmute your mics as we would be beginning with our discussion on the topic we have on our agenda. And to all the participants, please make sure that your mics are on unmute to avoid any sort of disturbances during the entire session. Um, to begin with, I would be like we would be big we would begin the webinar by discussing the current situation of medical education in our country, because it has never been like this as it is now during the COVID times, and it is something which we really need to address now. So, to begin with, my first question is to all the three panelists we have with us. And it is like the first question is that how do you think, do you think our current health infrastructure and our medical education system is competent enough to work in a pandemic? And because what we've been following all throughout the years it definitely has interfered somewhere or the other in our system right now, which we're facing due to COVID. So I would love to start off with Dr. Ravikant sir, and we would love to hear your views on this question, sir. Please, sir.
First is welcome to all the students and all the faculty members. More so to students who are in the campus and also to the students who are outside the campus because of this fear psychosis. So question is the health infrastructure and medical education system is competent enough to work in a pandemic? My answer is yes. Why not? After all, what you need in a pandemic? You need in a pandemic, first is a knowledge, and then carefully deciding for each one, what is your capability and where you can work. And there are so many areas. We need areas like teleconferencing, we need teleconsultation, we need masses need information. So there's so many areas where students can be involved even without going to a certain area. And then we can also have, I would say, as far as most of the central institutions are concerned, they are very well endowed with the system. Obviously, one can always hope for the sky, but then it depends on how much we need to do. We have issues on the defense borders. We have to spend money there. We have issues with the very poor people. We have to spend money there. So totality of the scenario of income versus expenditure, a reasonable request could be that our 1% GDP expenditure can increase to 5%, but that will take some time because some pressing engagement on the borders and with the poor are taking those finances away. But I think as a whole, we are quite well settled to manage the pandemic much better than 1918, much better than 1320, and so many pandemic every 100 years. We are in a very good situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was lovely to hear that, and it's lovely to see a positive aspect to the entire situation, considering how depressing and how demotivating it has been to all the students. So, thank you so much for your views on this question. Moving on, we would love to hear from Dr. Anshu, ma'am, of what she thinks about this question. So, ma'am, moving on to you. Thank you so much.
Everybody, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. So at the outset, let me thank the Medical Students Association of India and the Medical Students Network of IMA for inviting me to this panel discussion. A special thanks to Khushi, Dhruv, Molly, and Garima for inviting me. Dr. Ravikant has just mentioned about how healthcare has been affected, and I would like to focus on medical education. This pandemic has caught all of us unawares. Now, if you see, not just medicine, but almost all walks of society have been affected by the magnitude of this pandemic. None of us anticipated it. It has been unprecedented. And life in general has been disrupted. Life has been thrown off the rails. We've just heard of the kind of pressures that people are undergoing with the death of a very young life, Sushant Singh Rajput. And so in general, there is no walk of life which has not been affected. If I take a look exclusively at medical education, you will see that what all of you experienced was suddenly your classes were suspended. You all went home thinking it was a big holiday. Some of you even went there without books. And then you realize that this lockdown has been imposed. And maybe it's gone on for longer than you have expected. And you don't now suddenly you're worried about how things are going to move. Sometimes a crisis brings about lots of different positives. Like they say, every dark cloud has a silver lining. If you look at medical education, for a lot of time, both the Medical Council of India and the accreditation agencies had been forcing us to try introduce technology, introduce e-learning. But suddenly now, with the way things are, this has been thrust on us. It has been imposed on us. And there's no way you can walk away from it. So what people had been struggling to get faculty to use e-learning, now they really have to do it. So that's one positive out of it. The second thing, so I would say that the coronavirus has acted as a catalyst and and tried to push something that we tried to actually do something which we had been trying to do for a long time now. Um, what I'd like to say is that which are the people who are going to actually succeed in doing this. There have been some medical schools which have been good, which have been preparing for this kind of e-learning, and they will find it quite easy to adapt. And there are other colleges, you know, we have a large country with almost 600 medical schools, and the quality of each of them is not alike. So what is going to happen is that schools which are able to adapt quickly, who are able to see what is going on around the world and do well, will survive. Whereas schools which cannot bring up that kind of quality will not. So I think the quality of any system or the quality of any medical school here will be defined by resilience. Resilience, as I define it, will be the quality to get up and walk once you've been knocked down. So we have been knocked down unawares by the coronavirus, but can we get up and walk is the question here. And having said that, I will say most of the faculty here have stood up to the challenge. And I think every medical school here has started some classes online. Here, what I would like to ask is that enough? There, you students are lucky because you adapt to technology very fast. This is a generation which gets up and knows how to swipe left. Even television screens are swiped left by babies here. So what you have here is a generation which is full of digital natives. And we faculty come from a different generation where we are digital immigrants. You will find it easier to adapt compared to faculty over here. So what you will find is that there are some teachers who will find it easy to adapt. Others are just using their old PowerPoints and trying to teach you. So there is, it's not all well. I wouldn't say everything is hunky-dory, but we are all trying. So our reaction, our responses have been good, have been necessary, have been knee-jerk, but this is not enough. We have to plan ahead. We have to think about staying ahead of the curve, if I'm to use a phrase which has been continuously used these days, that we have to think of how our medical systems are going to be more efficient and more effective. So these are things we need to consider. And I don't think everything is dark ahead, but how quickly we respond to it, how effectively we learn to cope with this and adapt and accept this as the new normal will make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a beautiful and a holistic view over the entire scenario. It was really motivating a lot to hear such views. Thank you so much again. Before we move on to Dr. Ravi Vanketkar, sir, I would just like to say that if you have any questions, we would be having a Q&A session at the end of this panel. So please feel free to drop down any questions you have in the chat box, and we'll ask those questions to all our panelists by the end of this panel. Thank you so much, and I move the stage to Dr. Ravi Vanketkar, sir. We would love to hear your views on this. Thank you so much.
Good evening, one and all. Good evening, Dr. Anshu, Dr. Ravikant. Thank you, Garima. Normally, last 1 month, I have stopped attending all the webinars. It is such an epidemic and creates more issues, but only because it was of the medical students and young medicals, I agreed to participate. Coming to the question at hand, I am very sorry to disagree with my friend Professor Ravikant that our public health system is totally ungeared to deal with this pandemic. It is not geared even in normal times. It is bursting at seams. If you see the public hospitals, maybe few centrally funded institutes may be having their resources, but once you come to the state funded or the local corporation funded hospitals, 80% of these poor people in our country prefer not to go to this public institute. Then that is a situation in normal times. And we have seen very well what is happening once the cases since 1st of June are rising rapidly. For last 70 years, we have been chronically neglected our health system. Health and medical education has never been on the political agenda of any parties up till now. Neither it has been on the priority. This is a very flawed argument that we need to spend money on defense and other things. People need to understand money spent on health is money earned. If we spend money on health, then our economy will strive in general also. And even in this pandemic, the old adage that you have to fix the virus. And once we fix the virus, the economy will get fixed. That is very, very important. Unfortunately, now a chronically neglected public health system, governments, may it be the central government or the state governments, are trying to pour money. It is like you chronically neglect a marasmic or a malnourished patient, and suddenly you try to give him on IV supplements and proteins and everything and expect him to run in this sprint, which we thought initially would be a 100 or 200 meter sprint. But unfortunately, this is going to be a long drawn back event where at least now the governments should understand that they need to spend more and more money like yesterday on public health. Your second part of the question, the medical education system. If you'll see, just 2 days back, the HRD ministry came out with the rankings of medical colleges. I'm very sorry to say that very few private institutes could have a ranking in those top 50 medical colleges of this country. In this pandemic, very rightly has raised certain very practical difficulties for my young medicos, especially on 2 counts. One, regarding their examinations. It is a good situation at least that this time the exam going batches are much of a smaller number. But most of my student friends went home, or even if they stayed back, there were practical difficulties of their mess being closed, no transport, who went home, didn't carry their books, and more so ever, there was a huge uncertainty in many states that what is going to happen to our examinations. Indian Medical Association and various other organizations raised their voice, and it is very unfortunate that the Medical Council of India, currently directly controlled by the Government of India through the Board of Directors, has not risen to this challenge. And the great amount of difficulties and uncertainties and unpredictabilities, which is there in general because of this pandemic, and more so ever in my medical student friends regarding their examination and their classes, it has not risen to the occasion at all. We had to use all our influence to the various medical universities in various states. And now, because of our pressure, they are releasing the dates of examination. Still, it is very unclear that how the examinations are going to be conducted, from where the examiners will come. If they come, will they be quarantined? How the students will come, will they be quarantined? This is more so ever for the postgraduate medical examinations, where at the front line or the backbone of management in the government medical colleges of COVID, it is the residents who are doing 90% of the job. And how you are going to ask them without any preparation to appear for examination? Again, all this is linked to the cycles decided by the timeline decided by the Medical Council of India regarding admission in post-graduation courses or super specialization courses. What is going to happen to it? What is going to happen to the timeline and the deadlines for start of internship, end of internships? All these are big, huge, unanswered questions which should have been answered at the very beginning. Anticipation of a problem. It is very easy to say that this is such a huge crisis that everyone has to do sacrifice. Yes, already my young friends, young medicos are already doing lots and lots of sacrifices. And they are prepared to do it. But at least what is least expected is to end this uncertainty regarding their future. I would here mention that at least the Nursing Council, the Dental Council have taken some proactive steps, which has not seen, unfortunately. And lastly, whenever I see, at least in my state of Maharashtra, which has one of the largest privately funded institutions, very reluctantly, they have come forward for management of COVID patients. It was the publicly funded medical schools which are sharing the 80% of burden. And young friends, hence remember the plan, future plan of total privatization of all the district hospitals and all the government hospitals is to be opposed and seen to it that, because remember, starting a government medical college is not only an educational activity. It also creates a huge hundreds of bedded tertiary care hospitals. And we are seeing now that only these hospitals are treating 80% of the patient. It is not the private tertiary care hospitals. And all the bad media reports of overcharging are coming through this big for-profit corporate hospitals. Hence, one has to be very watchful against the blatant privatization of the public health system. And lastly, I would also like to mention a point that few state governments and few private medical colleges are doing two things which are very wrong in this current crisis. One, increasing their fees, and secondly, insisting on paying of tuition fees when everybody understands that all of us are going through economic crisis. And in such current situation, to insist or to increase in the tuition fees, I think it is ethically, morally, totally wrong. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a detailed and an elaborate overview about the whole situation. I'm sure the students got a very good idea about what's the situation like in our country. And thank you so much again. That brings me to such like the discussion on this question was quite beautiful, with so many different views from our panelists, and which gave a holistic idea to all the participants here about the situation, and is our medical education and health infrastructure competent enough to deal with the pandemic or not. That makes me come to my next question, which again is to Dr. Ravi Vanketkar, sir, about how do you think it is affecting the students at different levels, ranging from first year to final year students, because considering that even first year students in the new curriculum have going to clinics as a part of their curriculum. So how do you think it is affecting them at different levels? And also a question within that again, that how do you think it can be managed both from the system side as well as from the student side to overcome this barrier of online learning and exams, which has taken such a big hit during the entire pandemic? So yes, sir.
Thank you. Basically, if you see, I am also a professor of surgery in Government Medical College for last 30 years. First year students or online teaching, out of compulsion, yes. Everybody is talking of it. We will have to do it till the current pandemic is mitigated. I am not saying stop because nobody knows when it will end. But nothing beats the actual face-to-face teaching and actual clinical postings. Unless and until they are compensated, till that time, it's like you are eating twice a day, but you are unable to eat and we give you IV supplements just to maintain your health. Same is with online teaching. Medical field, if you will have to learn not only the science, but the art part of it, you have to have face-to-face, a good teacher-student relationship, a good student-patient relationship, and unless and until our direct classes physically start, it is going to be very difficult. As I have said about examination, conducting examinations, especially on the final profs, it is going to be very, very tough. What are the in normal course, our examiners to get examinations, get examiners from various places. Say you are in Mumbai and you want to come out, say to a Nanded, and everybody is afraid, then are you going to quarantine that examiners? Plus our public hospitals now are totally full with COVID patients. From where are you going to get cases for practical examinations? Maybe like we were discussing at our Maharashtra University of Health Sciences, which is trying to organize examinations in one of those colleges in that area where it has not been turned into a COVID center. And even maybe allow students who have gone home to attend not to their parent college, but a college where they are at present staying and attend the examination there, so that all this traveling, quarantine and subsequent issues can be taken care of. But still, it is unfortunately still, and I'm very, very honest and blunt, which I am known for, politics plays a big, big role. And whatsoever decisions, my dear students, always are not based on academics, neither in the interest, taking into interest of the students. And that is why you students are taken for granted. Never let that happen. Always, always one has to be very, very aware all the time about our issues, about our rights, along with, of course, the responsibilities. And I am very, very proud of my young medicos, that the way the responsibility of corona management, the COVID disease management has been handled by my young medicos is out of the world. If my young medicos would not have been there, it would have been very, very difficult. And it is very sad at places to see that internship stipend is cut. The residence pays are not being paid properly. Initially, they were not provided with the adequate standardized personal protection equipments. All this, in spite of all this, my young medicos, really, I salute you. And it is the duty of all of our seniors to take care of our young medicos, because I always say your biological parents are different. But once you enter a medical college, we medical teachers are your professional parents. And whatever happens, just like parents take care of you at home, we should be taking care of you in our medical colleges and in building up a good career, making you good human beings, because everybody becomes the same doctors, pass the same examination. The difference lies in being the good human beings. I hope the regulatory authorities at all levels really because they exist for students. Their focus has to be students only. And if they look from the angle of students, what actual difficulties he faces, I think 90% of the problems can be solved easily. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was very well said, and thank you so much again for putting such an honest overview about the whole situation to all of our students. Moving on, I would like to ask the same question to Dr. Anshuna. So, ma'am, moving on to you. Thank you so much.
Molly, your original question was how do you think it's affecting students? So I think students at every level are being affected. And I think the biggest way in which all of you are affected is you're missing your friends. So this kind of isolation that you're experiencing at home without studying together is and it causes anxiety, it causes stress, and you don't know because you don't know how much everybody else is studying and how you are studying. So this is one genuine thing which all of you are facing. If it is reassuring to say this, can I tell you that you are not alone? Across the world, every institute, all medical students are going through the same thing. And while you are at home, your faculty, your teachers have been trying to improve their skills. So through the last few months, we have been subjected to intensive webinars where we've been learning how to improve online teaching. So having said this, this is all a stopgap arrangement. So at a stopgap arrangement, what are the things that are possible at this hour? Are, yes, we can give you theory lectures, we can give you assignments, we can do things online, we can take tests, we can conduct internal assessments, yes. The only problem is skill, and the big worry is what about clinical skills? Because content delivery, even if you don't come back to college, we can still give you all the books and tell you what to read, and you will all be able to do it. But that doesn't make a teacher. What you need are attitudes, you need skills, you need the real temperament, and you need to see people working here. So that is a big question which worries not only you, but it also worries all of us. This is the stopgap arrangement which is working here. People are still working and thinking about short-term measures, about how you can do internal assessment, how do you score, how do you pass. That's all feasible. Where you're missing out is the skills. Now, what about skills? What are the skills, part of skills which you can learn online? You can learn history taking online. That's quite feasible. You can actually hear auscultation sounds online. What you cannot do is actually touch a patient. So there are limitations to what you can do. But given the condition we are, there are still a lot of things that we can do. This is not enough. What we need to do is think of the future and not throw the baby out with the bath water, because we have now that weapon of e-learning. So even if Corona goes away, I hope e-learning continues, and we have a form of blended learning. And I hope we don't have to go through a series of lectures from 8 to 5 again, like you all did, because you are all capable of studying on your own. And if you have gone through school doing a lot of spoon feeding as studying, I think you will enjoy this kind of learning where you are expected to do things yourself. And this kind of self-directed learning is something you need to learn. So one, I expect the future to have a lot of student-centered or learner-centered learning. And I just heard a complaint in the chat box here saying nobody asked students. But so now the role of the teacher will change. A teacher will not be somebody who will stand on the stage and give you a pravachan, and you'll be expected to absorb all of that. No. The teacher will no longer be a content provider. A teacher will be a facilitator. What this will require from you students is that you will need to be more self-motivated. If you're asking me, how are things going to change? The students who are self-motivated, who are good at time management, and who know how they are going to study on their own are the ones who will succeed. It will be the survivor of the fittest if you are good at all this technology, at all of these. Because even if Corona goes away, blended learning will continue. And I studied for a short duration in Maastricht, And I'll tell you what the school system was there. They used to call us to college. They used to have one lecture in the morning, one somewhere in the middle. So, and the time between the two used to be such that you couldn't go back home. And in between, you had lots of group work, lots of activity, lots of group projects, where by doing something, you learned something. So that is the way forward for medical education. In the present situation, what do we expect from students? We are keeping asking what everybody else is going to do for you. My question is, what do you expect from students? One is patience. Patience is a quality we need from you because your teachers are learning and they're trying to adapt. So one, trust them that they're trying to do something, believe in them, interact with them, talk to them, and also give them feedback about what is working and what is not working. We cannot move forward. We are a team who need to move forward, and we need to hear from you about what works and what doesn't. I don't think this series of webinars will keep continuing and it will work, because I cannot sit and listen to a webinar for more than 20 minutes. I don't expect you to sit online and keep reading online all the time. So the way you structure a course will completely change. What you will probably have is things to read, things to do, and then you have to provide some kind of evidence that you have learned, which may be in the form of an assignment, maybe in the form of a self-assessment, something which will show teachers that you have actually gone through this. So that is one aspect of it. What do institutions have to do? What do governments have to do? The thing here is nobody can do things alone. When we look at a society, you can see the cracks in society at the moment. You can see the difference between the privileged and the underprivileged. The first thing you'll need to consider in this e-learning world is, do all students have equal access to e-learning? The net connectivity, the data, the cost of data is very high. It's not easy. Do all students have smartphones? Do all of them have the privilege? That's something you need to realize. And unless everybody is at an equal level, it's unfair to students and expect them to go expect them to all move to e-learning together. So we need to do this slowly, but we surely require to do this. I have been just seeing what people have been doing at the school level, from 1st standard to 12th standard. The government has opened something called Diksha. And under Diksha, there is a program called Vidyadan. What they're doing in Vidyadan is they're asking all educators, all teachers who can help to register themselves and upload whatever teaching material, whatever videos, whatever good assessments they have online. So I think that is the way forward for medical education as well, because we have a huge disparity in the kind of medical schools that we have. There are some very good, some very bad. Some of them have skills labs, some of them don't. At the moment, of course, there are no patients in the wards anywhere to show all of you, but maybe there are some schools which have got good patient videos for teaching already available. So what we need to do here is to stop monopolies and to start sharing that material. So we need to have one uniform platform where all the colleges can start sharing whatever good teaching material they have. Maybe you cannot start with all the schools together. Maybe you need to do it university-wise. But the first thing would be to construct a platform where you have all the content together. Second is to structure your learning and teaching into the form of modules. Like, you cannot have only online lectures and say the topic is over. So probably you will have to design. So what are your objectives? For learning this, what should a student do? So maybe you don't have your own videos, but I think YouTube is full of them. There are things at other universities. Start sharing that information, decide and simplify the content for the student. Whether it is at the UG level or the PG level, you start simplifying the content. And when you all come back, we will start doing the skills. I think this batch in particular will suffer, especially the final years. But I think it's something which you can make up at the internship level, where you can start learning for skills. As far as practicals are concerned, I think most practicals can be converted into online OSCEs. So if you have seen what OSCEs are, using videos, using Zoom classes, using breakout rooms, it is quite possible. It needs a lot of creativity. It needs money for the infrastructure, but it's not that it is not feasible. So the only thing I'm worried about is actually touching patients and all that. We have talked to com- uh, our faculty in the West and how they are doing. So everybody is struggling with the same thing. I know of an anatomy teacher who actually in his garage opened a classroom where he uses his son as a demonstration and demonstrates all the muscles and everything on his son. So I don't know how we are going to do it, whether you can teach suturing online or you can, but I don't think it's entirely impossible. You need a lot of creativity to do it. So this is a stopgap arrangement. Eventually, when you come back, you will have to do hands-on. So things are not all hunky-dory, but they're not all bleak. Start looking at the silver lining. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving such a clear perspective on the whole scenario again. We have quite we have a lot of questions asking about how the clinical experience will be affected, and that is something which we will be moving on to in our second part of the panel. So hopefully all of your questions will be answered there regarding this, regarding the clinical experiences and how that will be affected. We'll take some of the questions as we have limited time in the entire webinar. We'll take some of the questions from the chat box to ask our panelists. So I would like to ask Dr. Ravi Kant sir. We have one of the questions saying that will conducting exams online really be beneficial for all the medical students? So what do you think about this question? And yeah, moving on to you. Yes.
Let's see what most of the countries abroad do. The countries abroad focus more on formative assessment and less on summative assessment. So that is, let me explain more simply. Is every week examination that is more important than once a year examination? And so much so that most of the American universities focus as much as 70% marks are on formative assessment and 30% on summative assessment, whereas we have 80% summative and 20% formative. There is a fundamental flaw. If we convert our teaching and training into a module where every module, suppose whole curriculum is divided into 200, 300, 500 modules, each module is taught, each module is tested. Therefore, there is not a heavyweight focus on the final exam. Unless until we go to that philosophy, there'll be always a flaw with the so-called examiner syndrome, stress syndrome, pressure syndrome. So there is a big issue as to, do we understand medical education? My answer is no. Most of us do not. We don't understand that every student has to pass all the 300 or 500 module. And if they don't pass, they have another week to pass it. So they are not losing a big time. Suppose there is a module on how to examine neck and how to see the thyroid moving up and down. Suppose if you have failed, you have one more week and then pass it again and move it on. And that sort of phenomenon should be there. So we have to go for more and more of formative assessment. That is one. Regarding examinations, all theory examinations should be entirely computer-based, as in the NEET, as in the IIT entrance, as in the USMLE, as in the UK, as in the Europe, as in the Australia. So there is no question of theory examination being disrupted at all by any process at all. Now we come to the practical examination. Once we have focused more on the formative assessment, this practical assessment fear psychosis will go automatically. So the medical educationists need to relearn what the medical education is. And the student will be following what you call as a McMaster program, which will be much more easier. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering that question. We have a lot of questions regarding how clinical experience will be affected. So I guess we can move on to the second part of the panel, which will be focused on how clinical online trainings can affect our skills. We are running in a limited time, hence it's a little difficult to address all the questions, but we'll try our best to answer all of your questions in the next section. So moving on, I would love to hand it over to Garima, who's my co-moderator and from IMA MSN. So Garima, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly. Myself, Garima from IMA MSN. Due to massive surge of online training classes, the topic for the second panel is Impact of Online Clinical Trainings on the Skills of Future Healthcare Professionals. So the first question for the discussion is, clinical postings and practicals cannot be conducted effectively online. Will the students be at loss because of this? And how do you think it will affect their ability to be a better future healthcare professionals with no exposure to patient interaction? And along with this, what will be the effect of this on future healthcare workforce? So I would request Dr. Ravikant sir to share his views on this topic. Over to you, sir. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Sorry. Welcome all the students. We at AIMS Rishikesh have heavily invested into simulation in 2017. It's one of the best simulation center, not only in India, but also in the world. Anything you can imagine, right from childbirth to clinical examination to ICU care, you can do on the simulation lab. And that is a big help at this time. That is part A. Part B, we have certain what you call it a simulated actor area where we have got those who are proven to be RT-PCR negative for corona. Those actors are there, and you can demonstrate physical sign on them, at least how to examine neck, how to examine abdomen. All these things can be done very easily on them. Now, part 3. Our whole building is divided into 3 buildings. A, building D is entirely corona positive. Building C is entirely where corona suspect are there. Building B, where corona negative, proven on RT-PCR are there. And building A is more of teaching and training and simulation and classes protocol. So considering that when we have got a proven RT-PCR negative, which we do it again twice, 5th day and 8th day. If that is the scenario, we are investing so much on, say, testing those patients. And if we say it is negative, then what is the fear? And even if you have fear, we are willing to provide you what you call as PPE and N95. There's a liberal supply of them. And all when we teach every nurse how to don and doff an PPE, why not the student should learn? When we teach every technician, every X-ray technician, every housekeeping staff how to don and doff, why would not a student learn how to don and doff? That is second point. My third point is, I've seen videos from Korea, I've seen videos from Italy, where the students were involved in observing how corona patient being treated in the ICU. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. If we take a adequate care, as would be any other HCW in that area, and they can observe clearly how this patient are being managed. Third point, we have done a lecture theater, a split lecture theater, where based on physical distancing, we use 2 or 3 lecture theater for the student and video transmission. And there's another teacher sitting in that hall. So it is a, say, monitor as well, but two-way transmission. And then we can take classes and all in a, what we call it a flip classes, where the student present and we listen and we moderate, and that remains what we call it a PBL module more and more. So it means we have to advance with the knowledge, the technology, the resources. And as far as fees is concerned, I'm sure most of the students will be happy to know that we charge only 5,000 rupees for 5 years, including hostel and tuition. So our fees is almost zero, you can say. So we have to understand that unless until technology driven, unless until resources driven, unless until current medical education philosophy driven attitude is there, we will be way behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a great insight and a great idea of this simulation center and the different lecture theaters. Now, I would request Dr. Ravi Wankhedkar, sir, to share his views on the same. Ravi
I,
Wankhedkar, sir.
yeah, I entirely agree, and we have to blend in what Dr. Anshu ma'am and what Ravikant sir is saying. There are areas in our country which have a very less COVID load, and the medical institutions which have all the resources, the skill labs, the simulation labs, they need to cooperate with all other medical institutions, say in a very high hotspot area like Mumbai, where the students are really not able to learn or move out anywhere. I think this idea of a massive cooperation between the medical institutions and their experiences and their technological resources especially can be shared and made available to all the students on an open platform will help in addressing the issues which are faced due to current crisis. And I also 100% agree with Professor Ravikant that this massive shift is needed in the approach towards examinations. And this is a very time-tested utilization of actors as patients, used very effectively in the USMLE clinical examinations, can be very well now be a new normal in the coming years. And that is why I am again coming to my original point that the Medical Council of India has to be more and more proactive at this point of time and act as a coordinating agencies between all these institutions so that their resources can be shared. Thank you.
Garima, can I add something here?
Yes, I'm sure, ma'am.
Yeah, so I'd like to first thank Dr. Ravikant for bringing in the point of formative assessment. It is the way forward because everywhere in the West, they don't rely on one final examination to decide whether a student is good or bad. They decide on the basis of how a student has performed throughout the course. And that means more number of exams. And the more number of exams that you have, it's easier to assess what you have done and what you have not done. Even before the corona pandemic came about, the Medical Council of India has introduced the competency-based medical education syllabus. And I think the first year students have already started doing it. The second year was supposed to start in September. We don't know what will happen now. But according to that, what we as students didn't do, nobody asked us whether we need to intubate. Nobody checked whether we give proper injections. This is something that has to be tick marked until you are passed. So this needs to be done, and we have to ensure that every student acquires each of these competencies which are listed. So that is definitely the way forward. As far as the questions are concerned, if you look at what you were doing before Corona, all of you were in that high competitive NEET mode, right? So if you put your hands on your heart and ask yourself, honestly, were you actually learning skills or were you solving MCQs? So it was a big worry with MCI, with all of us also, that students were spending more times with multiple choice questions than with skills. And now that suddenly we're losing it, we realize what is missing from our lives. So sometimes a crisis ensures all of that. We need to, of course, learn skills. A good thing about this kind of learning will be that we can go in and study in depth rather than superficial learning. So the kind of questions which you are going to be asked will no longer be things about percentages and syndromes. You will be asked more about management. It is still possible to do it with simulation. You can learn diagnostic reasoning with virtual patients. There are apps to do it. They are expensive, of course, but even dissection, they show you with virtual models, and they have artificial intelligence. All of this will take time to come. So I think the present batches will will, to use a bad word, suffer, but eventually there will be a way forward. However, I still believe that unless you learn how to touch a patient, how to examine a patient, it's no point being a doctor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a great insight and a great thought. I would request the participants, if any of you have any question, you can put in the chat box. Now, moving on to the second question for the discussion. How do you think medical students can make the most out of this opportunity of staying at home and learning clinical skills online? Also, what steps do you think could be taken at institutional level regarding exams and the lack of clinical exposure experienced by students, especially the final years? I would request Anshu ma'am to share her thoughts on this topic. Over to you, ma'am.
Garima, can you repeat the
Uh,
question?
uh, Sure, ma'am. How do you think medical students can make the most out of this opportunity of staying at home and learning clinical skills online? Also, what steps could be taken at institutional level regarding exams and the lack of clinical exposure experienced by the students, especially the final years?
I think I've answered the question about what institutions can do partially in the previous thing, but what can students do? My first advice to you would be to stay connected. Stay connected with your friends, stay connected with your teachers, because you need interaction to study. Otherwise, you don't need to come to college, right? You can sit there and start studying. So either you form your own small groups and study together online, or contact teachers. So you will need not just content delivery, you will need mentoring, you will need feedback. And so keep your connections open with the teachers. You might have to force them. Not everybody is comfortable with online platforms, but they'll adapt to it. I think there's one, when we were students, we would dare not ask students questions to teachers. But now when I go online, there are a lot of questions, and some of them are too difficult for me to answer. So you make us struggle really. But keep us on our toes. That's interesting. So I would say um, change your way of studying. So you need not do only the cramming part. See what fits you best. There, if you look online, there are good resources in terms of videos, in terms of teaching modules from other universities. And when you find something, don't hide it. My suggestion would be share that information with your friends. Um, Share it with your teachers also if they're not as net savvy as you are. And probably this kind of interaction is what we need in a term in a crisis. I heard a very sarcastic remark on the chat here, which said that why have you opened medical schools if you can't teach us? But actually, none of us ever anticipated that we will see this day in our lifetime where we will have to sit locked up in our homes for 4 or 5 months. So it's not something we visualized, but it is something we have to adapt. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a great insight. Now I would request Dr. Ravikant sir to share his thoughts. Over to you, sir.
No, I would say honestly and luckily, we were prepared for 3 years for this scenario. I mean, we have invested close to 100 crores only in this infrastructure. So you can imagine, I would start with a very simple comparison. What is the difference between final year and an intern? It's only 1 year. The final year wants to be away, an intern has to do duty. What is that difference? What is the difference between intern and a JR1 or PG1, PGY1? It's only 1 year. All PGs are doing duty. We have 300 faculty and 700 buildings and 100 interns. That is total of almost 1100 people working here round the clock. So question is, are they safe or unsafe? My answer is they are safe because we have made such a rigid protocol that their food is being served, their cook is tested, their housekeeping is tested, everything is being done. They've got plenty of lawn tennis, badminton courts, and billiards. And let's go to the next agenda now. If we had got a simulation lab, and if that is in an area where there's nothing to do with corona whatsoever, it is, say, you can say miles away from corona. Why not learn in the simulation lab? Similarly, we have got a scenario area, which is much away from the corona area. So what is the fear in that? My next question, next point will be that how can we teach them better? I think we need to focus again on a formative assessment philosophy. AIMS Rishikesh has a very different philosophy. Our total marks, 50% are formative and 50% are summative. Even in that 50% summative, certain part are based on such a scenario that final examination is not everything. So now what we'll do is we'll increase the 70% formative and not focus so much on summative that we can do easily. Next will be that we will be running classes as routine. In our virtual scenario, we have got what Dr. Manshu was saying, we have got not one, but we have got 5 such virtual dissectors. You can imagine how heavily we invested into that system. You can learn whatever anatomical dissection, whatever surgical strand, you can learn there. So my issue would be that institutional level, we are well accomplished, and our interns are paid 30,000 per month. Our residents are paid 1 lakh per month. So everyone is paid so heavily. Dot on time on 30th, come what may. So there is no question of delay. At the same time, we are also moving in a fairly advanced way, where Dr. Anshu said the Maastricht philosophy, the McMaster philosophy, the Dundee philosophy, and the Monash philosophy. All combined, whatever is current happening in medical education, we are adapting regularly, rapidly, quickly on day-to-day basis. So it's a very dynamic curriculum. I think that is what is required. But finally, I would say, if you don't put a hand on the patient, you will not learn. So question is, how can you do that? If you have to just learn how to examine a patient, we can have simulated actor even in your hostel where you will be safe, you can learn easily. So stay in that safe areas if you like. But if you want to examine patient, we can have such an examination patient area, which is tested twice for RT-PCR negative corona. It's a corona negative confirmed area, and examine those patients. If you want to be only in doffing in a PP, we will do all that thing for you. So it means the institution has to march in a very big way to meet this unprecedented, unthinkable crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a great insight. Now we end the discussion, and thanks to all the panelists. Now we move on to the question and answer session. There are some questions put by the participants in the chat box. So the first question, the one of the most important questions that came up is about the formative assessment, and if we are considering more on to the aspect of clinical aspect and working for the betterment of the patients, then how is this relevant from the point of competitive nature of our education system? I would request Ravikant sir to share your views on this.
Now, this examination system in which we are looking for where we'll go next, I'm sure this exit exam will solve this. The moment exit exam comes in, the NEET exam will be the exit exam. This will be one exam which will give you a degree, license, and also the next thing, exit exam is the answer to your competitive phobia. I'm talking phobia, in which students right from first year get involved. You must remember, irrespective of which college you are in US, whether from Harvard or to Yale or to Los Angeles, you have to pass USMLE 3 step as the foreigner have to pass. Same step everyone has to pass. It means we need a central system. We need a much more objective system, which we need a less subjective system, but more focus on module system. The module is one which will ensure that, suppose you have to learn how to assist in childbirth in a village. That is a module. And that we can do very easily. That we can do very easily on a simulation. We have got beautiful childbirth simulation. You don't need to go to the patient, but you can go to the patient if you like. You also have that option. Similarly, you want to examine the neck node. It is very easy that you have a simulated actor who is a proven RT-PCR negative, and then make him sit in the classroom, everyone examine, learn how to examine this thing. So we need to understand it is not impossible. It just needs a bit of imagination, funding, and everything.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is to Dr. Anshu ma'am. Isn't it the right time to obsolete the pathology test that we learn in classes and let our students face or study the real reports from the lab that will be interpreting after the MBBS?
Yeah, this has already been, the change has already been done in MEHS. We have removed all your urine examination and doing SALIs because all of those tests are obsolete. Instead, we have introduced heuristics, which is what pathologists use. And further, we have made it all clinical oriented. So you will be asked to interpret reports. So probably being asked to look at a complete blood count report and then interpret what is going to happen. So a lot of changes have already happened, and they were supposed to be implemented with the CBME curriculum. And a lot of OSCE was going to come in, where you have to demonstrate your skills. Skills teaching is an essential part of the new CBME curriculum. Also, I heard a question somewhere about research. So you have electives coming in. So the electives mean you will get 1 month to do a research topic within the curriculum, and you get 1 month to explore something that you really like. Maybe it's humanities, maybe it's nuclear medicine, maybe it's nephrology, something of that kind. So all of that is there in the new revised curriculum. We just didn't get a chance to implement it, and we are just waiting eagerly for you all to come back to institute so that we can start implementing it. And I don't think Corona is going to go away for a long time. We will have to learn and coexist with it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now the next question is to Dr. Ravi Wankherkar, sir. The students suffer from serious stress during this time. The pandemic has already made life so harder while still working or studying with no help from anyone. What advice would you give the students to brace for the future?
Thank you, Garima. Before I come to your specific question, I really congratulate Professor Ravikant, and I really envy the amount of grants and which has resulted in such a beautiful simulation lab and 100 crore rupees for one institution. We in Maharashtra don't get for all the government medical colleges together that kind of grant. And the way the interns and the residents are paid in Maharashtra, let me tell you, before we fought for it, the interns who were working round the clock in Mumbai hospitals were paid only 6,000 rupees, and out of that, a 10% cut was taken for the Corona fund of the government. Such is the pathetic situation, and hence we can't compare all the institutions. We have to see the ground realities. And the second point, which I think would require another webinar, about what comments were made about the next examination. And because we have very strong disagreements about this exit test and the way it has been proclaimed and compared to the Western USMLE, where the standards, uniformity, everything is different. And even labeling that it is a single examination. If you will go through the replies given by our Honorable Health Minister on the floor of Parliament, he himself is not clear whether this is going to be a single examination or it is going to be a multiple examinations ultimately. Let's not go into it, but I entirely agree. Already there is a massive psychological stress, not only on the students, but also on the general public. And that's what my original point was. This uncertainty and unpredictability about the COVID in general has been more so in my medical student friends, because the MCI and the various examination bodies have not been coming forth and take a preemptive approach to allay the anxieties. My advice to my students would be, stay connected, as Anshu madam has said. You have to make the best out of it. Everybody is under stress, lots of stress. And we are really worried. Even before this pandemic started, Indian Association for last 2 years started a very good initiative, the emotional well-being for the young doctors, because the number of suicides which were taking place amongst the young doctors was really saddening. Every month we used to get a report that our young doctors are committing suicide, and we fear that this particular crisis may exacerbate that situation. Already Indian Medical Association has started a helpline since day one of this pandemic for the students and for the doctors, along with Nimans of Bangalore, where we try to address the anxiety. And I entirely agree with Anshu ma'am that you have to be staying connected, use your time very judiciously, very nicely, and use this time to find out new ways and means to overcome this anxiety. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now the next question is to Dr. Ravikant, sir. What is should the students are asking? Should we include the research-based medical education system in our regular medical system? Should we include that or at undergraduate level, considering its importance as it's substantive from this pandemic too? So over to you.
Let me explain what the research is. The research is curiosity of the mind. If you do not have the curiosity of mind, you will not be a criminal detective, you will not be medical detective, you will not be a good, not only inventor, you will not be even thinker. It is the mindset which is important. And in the mindset, we have to understand that so many publications are there. If the publications are there, then question is, how do we read this paper? Is it relevant or is it irrelevant? And therefore, we have to understand the technology, that the meta-analysis is there, systematic review is there, randomized control trial is there, cohort study is there. And these are the ways that when we say level of evidence, we read the paper. It means even for reading the Google search answer, we need to have some methodology. I would say method and madness. Because if you click only breast cancer, 28,000 to 36,000 answers will come as publications. And you would have only 5-minute time. And we teach our student where you will find, everyone knows in our student, third-year student, Cochrane, search in Cochrane. So gradually, this mindset should be right from day one. And I would say it should start from class 11th, not only the medical school. That what is this all research business is? If you see the Germany, how they do, it's a 6 to 7 year course for MBBS, 1 year exclusively on research outside that university. And when you see there's so many nations who are marching ahead, we have to understand what is that whatever we want to buy, we buy from Germany. What is that we want to buy only from America? Why it is not being made here? That research mindset. We have to invest very heavily into research mindset and make it sure that everyone has either what you call it the Samarth research protocol of ICMR or the intramural fund or something like that. That is very important, that everyone must be focused on research. It is a mandatory must. Thank you.
I would like to add to what Dr. Ravikant said here. One skill which every student needs to learn is how to know whether a research article is wheat or chaff. That thing is the skill which all of us learn. Now, if you, I passed my MBBS 30 years ago, and if I look at what I learned in pharmacology, none of those drugs are available now. I can't pronounce half the names here because I didn't learn them in school. They've all changed. So by the time you graduate from medical school and finish your post-graduation, whole of medicine is changing so fast that everything is going to change. So one skill you do need to know is self-directed learning and how to identify a credible reference. So if you have seen Patal Lok, you remember the dialogue कि शास्त्रों में लिखा है लेकिन मैंने WhatsApp पे पढ़ा है. So that is a big problem here because you read everything which is, you don't know what is fake and what is correct. So one skill which e-learning thankfully brings in here is learning what a good and correct reference is and what is not a good reference. Critical analysis is important. What you need to do is introduce an activity called as treasure hunt into your lessons. It involves asking students to go and search for good articles on some topic and then justifying why that is a good article. That's one skill you must learn always. It's important. Thank you.
If you see from the Bailey and Love, right from 23rd edition, there is a one full chapter on clinical audit and research. It is a mandatory chapter. It is an inescapable chapter. And we teach right from beginning that what is a systematic review, what is a meta-analysis, what is a randomized double-blind prospective trial. The gold standard is randomized double-blind prospective trial. That is the bottom line one paper should read. The retrospective study, the cohort study, the case control study have level 4 evidence, and the expert opinion is level 5, which is equal to almost gossip. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir and ma'am, for a great insight on this point of research. Now, my next question is to Dr. Anshu, ma'am. There is a question like what students should do who stays in remote areas who don't have a good data connection for attending the online lectures, and what will be the effect on their lectures hereafter?
We have been discussing this at the Teachers Forum. I'm a part of the Academy of Health Professions Educators, and we've been focusing and emphasizing that nobody can sit and listen to online lectures for a long duration. I mean, if you have three in one day, your data card doesn't run so much, you have finished your data. So what you need to do is to provide them recordings or provide them material which they can see at their leisure. And get that concept out of your head that e-learning means online lectures. It's not true. Even if they tell you to read from page number 5 to 50 from your textbook and then give an assignment and submit it online, it is part of online learning. So your concept of having online learning equal to online lecture is wrong. And there are different ways of doing it. We can ask you to read something from somewhere and then give us an evidence that you have studied something. So give an exam, give a test. That's perfectly okay if you read in a different way. Is that clear?
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now the next question is for Dr. Ravi Wanketkar, sir. The most important question coming up is about the mental health and the psychological stress. So what students can do at their own level, and what is the role of the mentors and their local guardians in this situation? Over to you, sir.
Yes, very true. One needs to continuously interact. Again, stressing that point, don't watch TV for more than half an hour a day. Don't get numbed by the numbers. It is a known psychological phenomenon of psychological numbing, where after a certain stage, the numbers don't matter and we emotionally don't react to it. It's like getting a bizarre phenomenon of normalizing with the pandemic. And I agree with what Professor Ravikant sir said about the previous point about research paper. You need to yourself learn about what exactly the gold standards of research are. Unfortunately, even if you will see with this pandemic, till yesterday there were 27,000 official papers submitted. And last week, the controversy regarding the most coveted and most reliable journals of the world, the NEJM and the Lancet, nearly more than 200 years old journals, where they had to retract their papers on HCQs because the data was based on a company, unfortunately run by again 2 Indians settled in US, the Sergis pair. He is a great eye-opener. that we can't totally rely on the Western world and to copy or to blindly ape the Western models. One also has to think in all spheres of life. Even in this management of this pandemic, each country, each state has to bring out with its own strategies. Unfortunately, historically, we are always looking towards the northern hemisphere for guiding us in all our walks of life, which needs to change. We need to see of what South Korea could do. We need to see what Japan could do. And same is happening in the field of health, medical education and research. As I said, we run a very robust program. I will put on the number of the chairperson of our emotional well-being for students, and they are conducting lots of webinars, and definitely our students will be of great use if they attend these sessions. We have started a mentoring program where senior IMA members of that city will be allotted with that medical students in their colleges. We have linked up nearly 435 medical colleges with our local IMA branches. And in this period of anxiety, at least a local guardian type support from a senior doctor would be helping in allaying the anxiety of the students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. This was a really nice point
On this
about
point,
watching TV.
Garima,
Yes, sir.
if you permit, I can say something on this point.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
About this mental health program, you can imagine we are so much focused here because the stress on student is enormous and we understand it. And we hear sometimes unpleasant story from here and there. So we have created one medical humanities department, which apart from teaching soft skill, also teaches how to manage that. Number two, we have 3 psychological counselors which are stationed only in the hostels, where the student can come and talk to them. Number 3, we got regular, what you call as a cultural program, including Pandit Ravi Shankar group speaking or some other main group speaking, in which there is an interaction with the student so that they are made to understand that culture and art is the best anti-stress management. So we are focused a lot on not only soft skill, but also on counselor basis. And we understand as on today, our data says roughly 60 to 70% MBBS students need counseling at some or other point. That much is the level of stress, despite enormous infrastructure of sports. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really a nice idea about the cultural system and the counselors at the hostel level. Now, thank to all the participants for your question. I hope all the questions have been covered and the panelists for your views. Now we come to the end of this session. I would request the panelists to share their words and their views on for the session. Over to you, Ravikant, sir.
The answer to the melody of what you call as a, because I could see from the chat box, the students who were in a, different schools were a bit alarmed over what is happening in AIMS. Because when I was saying about culture and art, we spend 65 lakh each year on student welfare. That is a single budget only on student welfare. So apart from taking only 5,000 rupees per fees per year, for I would say it's a very small piece. But my answer would be, let's focus on number 1, formative assessment. Number 2, let's focus on module-based teaching. Let's focus on simulation. Let's focus on simulated actors. Let's focus on clinical X teaching methodology. Let's focus on flip method of lectures. Let's focus on student-based teaching program where the faculty is a moderator and a PBL sort of program. And finally, we can certainly assure with guarantee certain areas where all the patients, everything is corona free and anyone can go and examine with or without special equipment. That we can assure, 100%. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Anshu, ma'am.
I thank you all for being here, and I hope we've been useful to you. Uh, what should I say now? At the end, um, remember that your teachers also are equally stressed as much as you are, and especially because of the uh, situation in the hospitals where they're handling COVID patients. So probably there will be complaints from you that medical education has taken a backseat. But understand that perspective as well, because they are going through the same amount of stress, but in a different situation there. So my advice, or rather my suggestion to you, would be to get some exercise, watch less of Netflix, and stay connected with your friends and enjoy yourselves. And we're all waiting for you to come back to campus. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now over to Ravi Vanketkar, sir. Ravi Vanketkar, sir. Are you there?
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, IMA, MSN, and the Student Association of India for a wonderful interaction. Hope you arrange such interaction more in the future. Everybody is stressed out. This is an unprecedented situation, rightly said by Anshu ma'am. Everyone, including your teachers, are stressed out. Technology is going to definitely help us. Remember, but it is going to help only. It can't replace the actual human-to-human interface. Be compassionate. In this crisis is not only a medical crisis. Remember that. It is also a humanitarian crisis. And we, 99% of us come from privileged backgrounds. It is very important to be compassionate, make sacrifices. Sacrifice is different from charity. Charity is what you give in excess what you are having. Say if I have 2 rotis and I need only one, I give away 1 roti. But sacrifice is when I have only 1 roti, and even though I need 1 roti, I give half of that roti. That is what is sacrifice is. So if you follow this simple principle, I think you will be less stressed out. Thank you. Have a wonderful time spending with your parents and staying connected with your friends.
Thank
Molly,
you
just
so much, sir.
last word.
Yes,
First,
sir.
very quick. For the student first, just remember one word. If the paper is not in Cochrane, Cochrane is a technical word. If it is not in Cochrane.org, you read through the ICMR website free, then it is dicey, number one. Number two, the organizers, especially the Student Association and Molly and Garima and everyone, so grateful for this opportunity. At least students get the idea that even in India, there are certain centers which are different. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We really learned a lot and it really changed our perspective. Now, officially, we come to an end of this session. I would officially like to thank Dr. Ravikant, sir, Dr. Anshu, ma'am, and Dr. Ravi Vanketkar, sir, for accepting our invitation and enlightening us on this most important concern topic of the medical education during this pandemic, and all the participants for attending the session. During this time of COVID crisis, medical education has been the most concern for medical students fraternity. And I hope after this session, we all go home with a little more insight on this topic. And kudos to the team from IMA, MSN, MSCI, and MGIMS for organizing this amazing session. Also, I request all the participants to check their registered deal IDs for the feedback form, and after filling, you will receive your certificate shortly. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.